period of several years to at least $15 an hour. He promised to make public colleges and universities tuition-free for working families and to substantially reduce student debt. He promised to lower the Medicare eligibility age from 65 down to 60 and to also cut the outrageously high prices of prescription drugs in America. President Biden promised to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure and create millions of good-paying jobs and combat climate change. He said he would fight to make pre-K universal, to make sure that every 3- and 4-year-old in America has the quality child care and pre-K education that they need. President Biden promised to make sure that every worker in America has at least 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. And yes, President Biden promised that he would make sure that corporations like Amazon began to pay their fair share of taxes. The next OMB director will play a major role in determining whether those policy proposals succeed or whether they fail. And I want to hear from you this morning how you plan to work with the President, this committee, and the Congress to implement those promises that the President made. Lastly, what I simply want to say is that over the years, I worked with Mike Enzi, who was then the chairman, and Mike and I had a very, very good relationship. And I look forward to having an excellent relationship, a cordial relationship with the ranking member, Lindsey Graham, who I've known for many, many years. I hope, again, that this committee can be the committee that has serious, look, we have differences of opinion. We all know that. But let's have a civil debate, and I promise you that we're going to talk about the most important issues that face your constituents. So let's do that, and with that, let me introduce the ranking member, Lindsey Graham.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on being chairman of the committee. 2020 was a heck of an election cycle. It will soon be over, hopefully, in my lifetime, and we can move on with the nation's business. I've talked to Bernie several times about what we can do together, and there actually is a lot we can do together. I look forward to that. Senator Whitehouse is sort of on the fence about climate change, but if we can ever get him out of his shell, I would like to talk about what happens if General Motors by 2035 actually converts to all electrical vehicles. I mean, that's not, some left-wing group saying that. That's the General Motors saying that in 2035, I think it is that the date, or 2050, I can't remember now, that they're going to stop producing gasoline-driven cars. Well, what does that mean for the country, why they're trying to do that? And it gives us a chance, I think, to talk about big things. And there's going to be differences. Senator Sanders went down a checklist of big things, and one of my goals is to make sure that all these big things that we're talking about, other people paying for, that we have a sense of, how do you pay for all this stuff? And from a Republican point of view, we can't really say a whole lot about running up the debt because we did it too. But eventually, it's going to take people like Bernie and Lindsey and the rest of us around here to figure out what to do about the debt one day. I don't know when that day comes, but there'll be a day of reckoning. And I know Senator Whitehouse and Kane and others have been pretty open-minded about reforms. From my point of view, that would be revenue too. Make sure that the revenue is consistent with what we need up here to operate the government. But from Senator Sanders, I just want to tell you that we're going to have some real stark differences about reconciliation. We're going to have some very pointed differences. But the one thing I want to say about Bernie is that you believe what you're saying. You've been the most consistent voice in this body. And the one thing I respect is people who believe what they're saying. Senator Whitehouse, you believe what you're saying about climate change. And the question is, can we find some common ground given what we believe? We have some very talented people on our side of the aisle, and I would just challenge all of us to fight for our, without peacefully, that's the new word now, fight for your point of view, but see if there's some common ground here because the country needs it. As to the nominee, I've known her for a while. She's a very nice person, but not the unity pick that I was looking for anyway. So Ms. Tandon was receiving corporate donations, which is fine with me. I don't mind if you receive corporate donations as long as they're lawful and fully disclosed. And I think all of us receive donations from different groups. That doesn't mean you're your own because somebody gives you money. So I'm not going to hold that against you. But you've been a very partisan figure. You've been a very tough figure when it comes to political discourse, and that's okay too. But calling Mitch McConnell Moscow Mitch is probably not a very good thing to say. Suggesting that the minority leaders somehow in the pocket of the Russians. The GOP's capacity for evil knows no bounds. I'm sure a lot of people in America believe that. I'm not one of them. So Senator Sanders was Hillary Clinton's opponent, as we all know. So her scorn was not limited to Republicans. Russia did a lot more to help Bernie than the DNC's random internal emails did to help Hillary. Oddly, when Russia was trying to elect Trump, they did not attack Bernie Sanders. They chose to help him. They did this in the Democratic primary. They attacked the other candidate. I doubt if Bernie was Russia's pick either. So the point I'm trying to make here is that in a time of unity, we're picking somebody who throws sharp elbows. And there's going to be a consequence for that, hopefully on our side. As to her management capability, she referred to us for the Glassdoor review of her time of running the Center for American Progress. Again, she's a talented person, who's come a long way in life, but here's some of the reviews. June 2019, 1 out of 5 stars. Terrible, absolutely horrible. October 2016, cool work but absurd management. Disapproves of CEO. April 2016, influential organization poorly managed. September 2012, 2 out of 5 stars, bad management. February 13th, 2 out of 5 stars, great experience, terrible management. 2 out of 5 stars, April 2017, disapproves of CEO, doesn't recommend, what a mess. So all I can say is that this is not the unifying pick that I was looking for this position. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Lindsey. Amy Klobuchar, our senator from Minnesota, is here. Senator Klobuchar, thanks for being here, and I gather you want to introduce Ms. Tanden.
I do.
Please do.
I want to thank you, Senator Sanders, Senator Graham. Congratulations on your new roles to the committee, all gentlemen today. I know there's a few women on the committee, but it is my honor to be here to speak to you. The work of this committee right now could not be more important. I think you know what's happening with our country, and I admire the leadership role that you, Senator Sanders, are taking right now, and the entire committee. I'm proud to be here today to introduce my friend, Neera Tanden, a woman who is smart, organized, and tenacious. These are good qualities for the job. And if confirmed, she will make history as the first woman of color to lead the Office of Management and Budget. And I appreciate, I'm sure she'll address some of your concerns, Senator Graham, but I do want to know and note that a lot of people have said a lot of things on social media, and probably people in this room that they regret. And so I want to give you just a different sense of this woman and what she stands for. First, I want to acknowledge the people that are here with Neera, and that know well her perseverance and her ability to balance a budget firsthand. That would be her husband, Ben, who is with us, her 18-year-old daughter, Alina, over there. At the earlier hearing we had with Homeland Security with Senator Peters and Portman, which went well, her mother, Maya, was there with us as well. And I know she's watching from a distance today, as well as Neera's 15-year-old son, Jaden. It's an honor to tell you Neera's story. Not only is her story characterized by hard work and determination, but it actually shows the power of the American dream. Neera is the daughter of Indian immigrants and grew up in Bedford, Massachusetts. Raised by a single mom, her mom Maya, Neera learned the value of perseverance at a very young age. Maya, her mom, put her kids first. She relied on food stamps and public housing. She was on her own. but then she found new footing and began working as a travel agent, forging her family's path to the middle class. It is her mother's work ethic and drive that I see in Neera, and it's those same qualities that I know will serve her well as our next director of the Office of Management and Budget. As she started out as a travel agent, Neera's mom may not have ever thought that her daughter would one day be asked to serve in the cabinet of the President of the United States. But after years of taking no for an answer and setting high expectations for her family, somehow Neera ended up before us today. Growing up, Neera understood the circumstances of her family struggle and saw what worked and what didn't work. Because of that personal connection, she, from a young age, wanted to pursue public service. Throughout her career, she has shown a passion for improving people's lives. She brings years of government experience, including working in the Senate as then Senator Clinton's legislative director. And while people may have disagreements about Senator Clinton, I think everyone knows, and I know you know, Senator Graham, that her time here was marked by working across the aisle, getting things done, respect for other members, regardless of difference in beliefs. And Neera led that legislative effort. Neera understands, like you do, that inscribed in any budget is a set of priorities, choices about ensuring that everyone gets a fair shot. She knows that the work of Office of Management and Budget shapes the lives of millions of Americans' families. She's an experienced manager who will be ready to take the helm of the Office of Management and Budget on day one. In her near decade at the Center for American Progress, she led teams in promoting, as Senator Sanders noted, bold solutions to problems, including the pandemic. And no, not everyone in this room will agree with every solution she has put forth in her career. I don't agree with every solution she has put forth. But what matters, my friends, is her devotion to the country and her ability to do the job. That's why President Biden picked her. Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Graham, I know you both recognize the severity of the coronavirus pandemic, and this committee will and continue to play a key role in taking it on, and you will have a partner in Neera. She graduated from UCLA and Yale Law School. As I noted, she worked for former Senator Clinton. She has the background, and she knows how to forge practical solutions. As President Biden put it succinctly when he announced her, she's smart as hell. And maybe that's a good way to end. I know that all members of this committee can trust her to hear you out, to negotiate when necessary, and to do so in good faith. She will be a phenomenal director, and I urge the committee to give her utmost consideration and respect and support her nomination. Thank you very much, Chairman Sanders and Ranking Member Graham, and all members of the committee.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you very much for those remarks. Now we have a brief statement pre-recorded from Senator Booker.
Thank you for giving me this, what I consider a really precious opportunity to introduce President Biden's nominee to serve as director of the Office of Management and Budget, Neera Tanden. I want to first just be candid with you all. I have known Neera for decades. I don't like to admit that because it shows that both of us are old, but we go back a very long way. Neera is a friend in the truest and deepest sense of the word. And I want to tell you, when we first met and went to school together, she struck me as someone who had a powerful trifecta. She's a person of deep heart, authentic caring and empathy. She's a person of fierce intellect who I've learned a lot from, even back then in our days of study. And then finally, she's a person who has this spirit, this abundance of love for this nation, its ideals and its principles. And she has lived a life where she has been fiercely adherent to the highest ideals of patriotism, of service, of being there for others. I know that Neera's public career has been not only impressive, but she has lived a life of extraordinary impact. She was involved in both the Clinton and the Obama administrations. She served in the White House, in the Senate, in the Department of Health and Human Services, and most recently, she has led the Center for American Progress, providing critical analysis and policy research that has informed many of my colleagues and my office itself. Part of what has made her so impactful is that to Neera, policymaking is not an academic exercise. It is a powerful force that has deeply personal implications on the lives of millions of people. She understands that the decisions we make all have consequences, and often unintended consequences, and that we and the work we do, which she honors so much, has the potential to change life trajectories and make this nation more real for all of her people. Now, Neera, there's a great poem that is by the Langston Hughes about a mother giving a message to her son. And she says in that poem, the line is, "For me, life ain't been no crystal stair." In other words, life hasn't been easy. Neera's climb to impact and influence has been difficult. Neera was raised by a single mother who immigrated from India like so many others seeking a better life. America was a light unto her nation, in her nation. And Neera's family came here. Neera has said that when her mom could not find work, they had to rely on America's social safety net to keep them afloat. They relied on food stamps. They relied on rental assistance. And because they had the support they needed when they were struggling, Neera's mom was able to get them on their feet, and she got a job, and she bought a house, and she achieved so much of the American dream. But as we all know, the greatest part of the American dream is seeing your children do better than you, go on to heights that you might not have thought possible. As my mom often said, behind every successful child is an astonished parent. Well, Neera, as she went on to college and then law school with the likes of people like me, she has led a life that has given her mother great pride and maybe even a little astonishment. Neera saw firsthand what this country can do when it invests for its people. And in her example before us today, we see what a country that invests in its people can do, can accomplish. As leader of the Office of Management and Budget, Neera will be tasked with overseeing the office responsible for implementing the Biden administration's agenda and making our government work for people. During a time of a dual crisis in public health and the economy, Neera will be asked to help oversee our federal government's response and plan to rebuild and restore. She will be tasked with helping to ensure that the American people are being served by an accountable government, that it is transparent, and that it is truly committed to them. If confirmed, Neera will accomplish this American mission. She will offer the kind of vision that is reflective of her brilliance, of her huge heart, and of her commitment and spirit for this country. She will continue to be truly a public servant and a servant leader. She will lead with empathy. She will lead with skill and understanding for our economy and of our country's challenges. And she will lead with love. She will lead with love of country and all of her citizens. I urge my colleagues to swiftly confirm Neera Tanden's nomination. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share with you why I so believe in my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Ms. Tandon, under the rules of the committee, nominees are required to testify under oath. Please rise if you could. Do you swear that the testimony that you will give the Senate Budget Committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If asked to do so, and if given reasonable notice, will you agree to appear before this committee in the future and answer any questions that the members of this committee might have?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Please be seated. Now it's appropriate for you to give your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee. I am humbled and honored to be here today as President Biden's nominee to serve as Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Chairman Sanders, I am grateful for your visionary leadership, and Ranking Member Graham, I look forward to working with you if I have the privilege of being confirmed. I want to begin by thanking Senators Booker and Klobuchar for their gracious introductions, and I also want to recognize two members of my family are here with me today, my husband Ben and my daughter Lena, as well as two who aren't, my son Jaden and my mother Maya. I owe my presence here today to their love and support and to the grit and resilience of my mother, an immigrant from India who was left to make it on her own in America with two young children after her divorce from my father. Back then, she faced a harsh choice: stay in the United States and rely on the social safety net, or return to India where she knew her children would face the stigma of divorce. She had faith in this country and made the decision, I believe the courageous decision, to stay. We relied on food stamps to eat and Section 8 vouchers to pay the rent. At school, I remember being the only kid in the cafeteria line who used 10-cent vouchers from the free and reduced lunch program. I remember using food stamps at the grocery store. Within just a few years, my mother found a job, and a few years later, she was earning a middle-class salary. Soon, she was able to buy a home and eventually see her children off to college and beyond. I spend every day of my life grateful for a nation and a government that had faith in my mother and in me, that invested in our humanity and gave me a fair shot to pursue our potential. As I sit before this committee, I'm mindful that my path in life would never have been possible without the budgetary choices that reflected our nation's values, many of them made in the very agency I am now nominated to lead. That recognition and gratitude has been the North Star of my career. I've spent the past 20 years at the forefront of some of our country's most important policy debates. And for the past decade, I've led a major think tank that engages many of the areas that OMB handles every day, from budget plans to regulatory proposals to efforts to make our government more effective. My experience also extends to both the legislative and executive branches, having served in the U.S. Senate, at the White House under President Clinton, and at an agency under President Obama. I believe that experience provides me with a strong foundation to lead the OMB. I also know that the role of OMB Director is different from some of my past positions. Over the last few years, it's been part of my role to be an impassioned advocate. I know there have been some concerns about some of my past language in social media, and I regret that language. And I also want to say I express that regret to Senator Sanders and other members of this committee. I understand that the role of OMB Director calls for bipartisan action, as well as nonpartisan adherence to facts and evidence. OMB will play a vital role in addressing many of the country's biggest challenges, from beating back the virus to delivering aid that will help ensure a strong economic recovery to ensuring we build back better than before. If I am privileged to serve as director, I would ensure OMB uses every tool in its disposal to effectively deliver for America's working families, for small businesses, and to the many communities struggling right now. I would vigorously enforce my ironclad belief that our government should serve all Americans, regardless of party, in every corner of the country. I would ensure that our budget reflects the values of a nation built on hard work, human dignity, common purpose, and boundless possibility. And I would work in good faith with all members of this committee to tackle the challenges, the grave challenges Americans are facing. The COVID pandemic, as I said, the deep economic pain in our country, climate change, racial inequality, and the broad issue of inequality in our country. Let me finally say this. As a child in line with my mom at that grocery store, feeling shy and a bit embarrassed as we stood in line and my mom was using food stamps instead of money, I never dreamed that I would be sitting in this august room with great leaders like all of you. I am so incredibly grateful for the opportunities this country has given me, and I am profoundly honored by the possibility to serve and to help ensure that we provide real opportunities for those who come after us. Thank you for inviting me before this committee, and I look forward to your questions.
Tandon, thank you very much. And as the son of an immigrant, I understand some of what you are talking about. Let me begin by picking up on a point that the ranking member, Lindsey Graham, made. And that is, we understand that we are a divided nation, and on this committee there are people who have very, very different political points of view. But I think most of us understand that it's important we debate the issues and try to minimize the level of personal and vicious attacks that seem to be so prevalent all over this country today. I have a letter in front of me from, as I'm sure you have seen, a number of Republican members of the House concerned about some of the things you said as the head of CAP. But of course, your attacks were not just made against Republicans. There were vicious attacks made against progressives, people who I have worked with, me personally. So as you come before this committee to assume a very important role in the United States government, at a time when we need serious work on serious issues and not personal attacks on anybody, whether they're on the left or the right, can you reflect a little bit about some of your decisions and the personal statements that you have made in recent years?
Yes, Senator, I really appreciate that question, and I recognize that my language and my expressions on social media, caused hurt to people, and I feel badly about that, and I really regret it, and I recognize this. It's really important for me to demonstrate that I can work with others, and I look forward to taking that burden, and I apologize to people on either the left or right who are hurt by what I've said.
And as you know, it's not a question of being hurt. We're all big boys, and I don't see too many girls here, but big boys who get attacked all the time. But it's important that we make the attacks expressing our differences on policy, and that we don't need to make personal attacks no matter what view somebody may hold. So can we assume that as the director of the OMB, we're going to see a different approach if you are appointed than you have taken at CAP?
Absolutely. And I would say, social media does lead to too many personal comments, and my approach will be radically different.
Okay. Thank you. All right, let me get to another issue that concerns me very much. I happen to believe that big money interests have an undue influence over the economic and political life of our country, that too often campaign contributions are what determines policy rather than the needs of ordinary Americans. And according to the Washington Post, since 2014, the Center for American Progress has received roughly $5.5 million from Walmart, a company that pays its workers starvation wages, $900,000 from the Bank of America, $550,000 from J.P. Morgan Chase, $550,000 from Amazon, $200,000 from Wells Fargo, $800,000 from Facebook, and up to $1.4 million from Google. In other words, CAP has received money for some of the most powerful special interests in our country. How will your relationship with those very powerful special interests impact your decision-making if you are appointed to be the head of OMB?
Senator, I thank you for that question. It will have zero impact on my decision-making. I'm actually, CAP took a number of positions that disagreed vigorously with the policy positions of those institutions, but I appreciate this question, and it is my role, it will be my role to ensure that I'm only serving the interests of the American people, the administration, and its agenda to address rising inequality and address the needs of working families.
Ms. Tanden, will you at this point commit to doing what President Biden and I and many others want to see happen? And that is help us move to end starvation wages in America by raising the minimum wage over a period of several years.
Absolutely.
Will you do what President Biden and I and many other members of Congress want, and that is move to make public colleges and universities tuition-free for families under $125,000 a year?
Yes, as you know, President Biden has committed to make college affordable, truly affordable, tuition-free for middle-class families.
President Biden has stated that he would like to see the eligibility age for Medicare go from 65 down to 60. Is that something you will help him implement?
Yes, absolutely, and we know that that can actually help save money because it'll, over the long term, lower the costs per beneficiary costs of Medicare.
We pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and that is an issue I intend to take a hard look at as chairman of this committee. President Biden has indicated that he wants Medicare to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies to lower drug prices. Is that something you will help us move forward on?
Yes.
President Biden has said that he wants to guarantee 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. Is that something you will help us move forward on?
Yes, absolutely, and I have worked for over 20 years on the issue of paid leave.
Okay. President Biden wants to provide universal pre-K education for every 3- and 4-year-old in this country and make child care more affordable for working families, an issue of enormous importance in general, especially now in the pandemic. Is that something you will help us move forward on?
Yes, absolutely, and I think over the long term, those investments help us address both racial and income inequality.
President Biden has said that he wants to triple Title I funding for public schools to make sure that lower-income kids in this country are able to get the education they need. Will you help us move forward in that direction?
Yes, absolutely.
I know this is not necessarily universally held on this committee, but I happen to believe that climate change is an existential threat to our country and the world, and that we have the opportunity to create millions of good-paying union jobs as we transform our energy system. Is that something you will help us move forward on?
Absolutely, and as you know, President Biden agrees with you that climate change is an existential threat.
Lastly, I think where there is an area of agreement, and Lindsay and I have chatted how we can work together, I don't think anybody on your side denies that our infrastructure is crumbling and that we can create millions of good jobs rebuilding our roads and bridges and wastewater systems and water systems, et cetera. Will you help us go forward creating the jobs, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure?
Yes, absolutely, and I hope we can work in a bipartisan manner on infrastructure.
Good. Lindsay, yours.
Thank you, Bernie. One, congratulations to your family. You have lived the American dream. You seem to have an incredible background, and I want to congratulate you. So let's talk about policy. In the education debate, is there any room for school choice in the Biden administration?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you for your question. So the president has supported charter schools, and to the extent that we make sure that those charter schools are delivering, that they're accountable to the public, that they're as accountable as public schools. And so there's room for charter schools, absolutely, but they need to be accountable, and I think many charter school advocates recognize that. Anything
beyond charter schools?
Well, I mean, obviously in the country today, parents have access to private schools. I think that's one of the inequities we actually have to recognize, that upper income families have access to private education, and sometimes those have much more resources than public schools.
Okay, so let's talk about fair share of taxes. What is the fair share? What should be the corporate rate in America? What is fair for corporations to pay?
The president has supported restoring the corporate rate to, I believe, to a higher rate. I believe it's 35%, but I should double check.
Is
28%? I'm sorry.
Well, let's get this right.
You're absolutely right. 28%.
Well, that's what Grassley says now. Don't let him
28%.
speak for the Biden administration. Do you think 35% is a fair rate for corporations, or is that too high?
I would follow the president's policies on these issues.
Okay. What should the individual rate be?
Depends on the income of the individual.
If somebody makes $10 million.
I believe we should restore it back to 39.6.
Is that enough?
On the income, Yes, there are other
So,
ways.
so is that
we-
at 39.6 is fair in your belief?
Well, my role is to address the President Biden's policies, and he has.
I'm just talking about you as an individual. Would you go up higher? Would the American Center for American Progress support individual rates beyond 39.6, you think?
My role in this, if I have the privilege of being conferred, my role is to address the president's priorities, and the president's priorities has been to restore it to a 39.6% rate.
Okay, so that's fair. Do you believe raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour will cost millions of Americans their job?
Actually, the most recent data on this, and there's been studies over the last few years, 2018, 2019, indicate that the minimum wage, analyses that have looked at 40 years of minimum wage increases have found that the elasticity rate is different than previous understandings, and that actually job loss rates are relatively low.
So you think 1.5 million people losing their job would be relatively low?
No, actually, what I'm saying is that more recent studies, I appreciate that the CBO looked at several years.
But you
of
don't
studies.
accept it? Do you?
I think that I think that the important thing is to be guided by facts and evidence, and there has been a discussion about more recent data being more.
Have you ever run a restaurant?
I have not run a
Okay.
restaurant.
Well, you need to go talk to people who have, because I think they'll give you some facts.
I would say respectfully, Senator, we should also talk to the waiters and waitresses.
Yeah, I think they want their jobs. I think that the tip, doing away with the tip wage is probably bad for them. The best thing you can do for a waiter and a waitress is open up a new restaurant and people hire you away at higher wages, because a new restaurant in town needs good workers. So that's the way I believe to increase wages. But this is why we have elections. Simpson Bowles. Do you support a Simpson Bowles approach to dealing with the debt?
I think the Simpson Bowles approach, I think there are deep challenges with the Simpson Bowles approach. I think what we should really decide is
Do you
what we'd
support
like
that
to
concept of trying to find a bipartisan way to deal with the debt?
Oh, I think we should try to find bipartisan ways
do you support
to deal with
entitlement
that,
reform?
But the idea of the Simpson Bowles, I think there were some things that we found were not.
Do you support entitlement reform?
The president, President Biden, has put forward particular ideas on Social Security. One is to raise the payroll cap for people earning over $400,000. That is an idea he's put forward to address Social Security solvency, which would also address the debt.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. So real quick, on immigration. Here's what's happened thus far in the first 3 weeks. We stopped building the wall. We've halted deportations. We canceled Remain in Mexico policy, withdrew from asylum agreements with triangle nations. We eliminated advanced vetting for terrorists, reinstated catch and release. We're considering canceling the public charge rule. We're ending travel restrictions with countries with national security concerns. Do you believe that the sum total of these policies will lead to more illegal immigration?
I do not, and I would be guided by facts and evidence
Okay,
about
here are the
whether that will
facts.
happen.
So 178% increase in single adults coming across the border this year versus last, 50% increase in unaccompanied minors. So the fact that you don't see this as a problem is very disturbing. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Bernie.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. We're now going to hear via video from Senator Murray. Senator Murray?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me start by saluting you on becoming chair of this committee. I know you will do great things in this role. I also want to congratulate Senator Graham on becoming ranking member. I look forward to working with you both. Now for our nominee, Ms. Tandon. I think she is an excellent choice for this role, and I was thrilled when then President-elect Biden announced her as his nominee to lead the Office of Management and Budget. I have known and worked closely with Neera for many years, and I think she will excel as OMB Director because she brings both practical experience as well as knowing how to get things done, as well as the personal experience that's so important on the programs behind these budget numbers and how important they are to our families and to our communities. And now we need more than ever both sets of experiences. Neera brings a deep familiarity with a broad array of policy, including areas of great importance to me, such as healthcare and childcare and paid leave and income inequality, as well as extensive managerial experience from overseeing a very large think tank. I know she will also bring a high level of energy and engagement to the role of director that has been sorely missing. I had many complaints about Russ Vought as director of OMB. Chief among them was the complete lack of engagement and leadership shown by him in OMB during the coronavirus pandemic. I can assure my colleagues that these will not be issues if Ms. Tandon is confirmed as director. Whether or not you agree with her on every issue, you will not be able to question Neera's passion, her knowledge, or her engagement. This pandemic has put a spotlight on the everyday challenges that many families face, from finding affordable, quality childcare to having access to paid leave so they can take care of themselves or their loved ones without fear of losing a paycheck or their job, simply earning a living wage for themselves and their families. And of course, these challenges are even more acute for families of color. So my question to you and consists of two parts. First, can you tell me how you see this administration prioritizing investments in these core areas for families? Second, can you give the committee the economic case for prioritizing and making those investments?
Thank you so much, Senator. I would note that as we experience the deep economic challenges we're facing, that women are disproportionately being impacted by that. 4.2 million people are leaving the workforce. 2.4 million women are leaving the workforce, primarily because they're facing they're taking disproportionate impact. The recession is having disproportionate impact on caregiving. Women are leaving because they need to take care of children who are not in school, amongst other reasons. And so I do think that is a reason why it is important that we invest in childcare, that we have robust paid leave programs. Those programs are part of the American Recovery Plan, but it's also, I do think those are important areas for us to prioritize as long-term investments. As part of the President's Build Back Better agenda, he has put forward a caregiving agenda that has long-term direct support for childcare and paid leave, in which the United States, I would just note on paid leave, the United States would rejoin 99% of countries on the planet if we adopted a universal paid leave program.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And real quick before I close, I do want to briefly raise an issue of critical importance to my home state, which is the cleanup of Hanford nuclear site. We talked about this in our calls, but the federal government has a moral and legal obligation to clean up the Hanford site and to make sure that our workers are doing that very difficult cleanup work given the resources and protections they need. So I look forward to working with you in partnership to make sure the Hanford mission is on a cost-effective trajectory without compromising that critical cleanup mission.
Thank you, Senator. I would very much look forward to working with you on that issue.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murray, thank you very, very much. Next up is Senator Grassley.
Congratulations, Senator Burke, for your chairmanship. Congratulations to you. The issue I want to bring up, I discussed with you on the phone, and pretty soon you'll have 3 minutes to figure out what you're going to answer because I only have one question. In 1981, President Reagan issued an executive order issuing a common sense directive. Regulations promulgated by federal agencies should have more benefits than cost. I think that most Americans would agree that the benefit of a particular action should outweigh the cost of taking that action. Regulation should be a net positive for society and should have more benefits than doing nothing or taking another action. The emphasis on cost and benefits was further codified through Executive Order 12,866, issued under the Clinton administration. This order also required agencies to submit significant rules to the Office of Independent Regulatory Analysis for review according to or accompanied by cost-benefit analysis. I don't think any of this would strike the average American as unreasonable. However, President Biden recently issued a memo entitled Modernizing Regulatory Review. This memo threatens the important role that cost-benefit analysis plays in the development of a regulation and creates a framework that could unleash a torrent of burdensome and overreaching regulations under the guise of improvement to society that can't be measured or proven. It instructs OMB to update its guidance to agencies to, quote, fully account for regulatory benefits that are difficult or impossible to quantify, end of quote. It also instructs OMB to provide suggestions on how the regulatory review process can be used to promote vague concepts such as social welfare, racial justice, and human dignity. All goals that we should all seek, I guess, but it's kind of hard to quantify it. There's no mention of taking into account more non-quantifiable benefits or costs, only benefits. The executive order seems designed to take nonpartisan, objective analysis out of the rulemaking process in favor of subjective claims of social benefit that could be used to justify virtually any cost, economic or otherwise, on the backs of everyday American. This sounds like writing any regulation for any rationale can be justified, and I think it opens the floodgates. So here comes my question. Existing OMB guidance already outlines how costs and benefits should be quantified and compared. It outlines a process for agencies to consider impact on a regulation that may be hard to put into numbers and how to evaluate those costs and benefits against more concrete. So, to you, in what ways is the current guidance insufficient to capture qualitative costs and benefits? And going forward, how will agencies be instructed to compare quantitative and non-quantitative benefits and costs?
Thank you, Senator Grassley, for your question. And I would just note the President Biden's recent executive memorandum does not limit the power of Executive Order 12866, which outlined cost-benefit analysis. So it's my orientation, and it is the process behind this. The process here would indicate that we continue cost-benefit analysis. But the memorandum outlines why it's important to have more information. And I think that's really the idea behind this executive memorandum, is to ensure that we have up-to-date and more information. And if I may just give an example of what I think the executive memorandum is driving at. So as part of the Americans with Disability Act, there were rules promulgated around access to bathrooms and ensuring that people with disabilities have access to bathrooms. And there's obviously a cost-benefit analysis to access to bathrooms, but there is also a dignity interest in people with disabilities having access to bathrooms. And I think that's really what the executive memorandum is trying to outline, is that we take into account that dignity interest, which you are absolutely right, is intangible. And I would agree with you when we were discussing issues like those kinds of intangible qualities, that we would look at them both on the cost and benefit side. But I also think we should analyze how rules are impacting subpopulations, communities of color, rural communities. Sometimes regulations can disproportionately impact rural communities, and we should understand what kind of impact that has.
This is not a question, and I'll close with this. I think in our telephone conversation, you spoke about transparency.
Yes, absolutely.
And transparency on this would be very important, because that sort of transparency is only the way to which I can judge you're following what you just told me.
Absolutely, and I would commit to you, Senator, and members of this committee to be as transparent as possible, not only on the rulemaking process, but in budget discussions and elsewhere regarding the work OMB does.
Thank you.
Senator Grassley, thanks very much. Senator Wyden is going to join us virtually. Ron?
Thank you, Chairman Sanders, and it's great to see you in this position, to have a chance to work with Senator Graham. And suffice it to say, Ms. Tanden, I've worked with you often in the past, and it's very good to have you here today. The time is short, so I'm going to dig right in. Millions of Americans are unemployed this morning, and expanded unemployment insurance expires on March 14th. Across the political spectrum, there is a recognition that in helping those laid off through no fault of their own, expanded unemployment insurance packs an exceptional bang for the economic relief buck. It's weekly, it is spent on groceries and rent and medicine locally, and it literally has kept communities afloat since spring of 2020. The program's got a major limitation, though. It allows politicians to pluck an arbitrary end date for coverage. With that, it satisfies the political agenda of the politician, but it doesn't meet the needs of those who are suffering. To meet the needs of those who've been laid off through no fault of their own, it's time to tie unemployment insurance to real economic conditions on the ground. And it just defies the principle of good government to empower politicians rather than empowering the unemployed who, through no fault of their own, overwhelmingly want to work and want to get ahead in the economy and help their families. So I propose legislation to fix this. And it's through something called a stabilizer, which is really fancy government talk to say when unemployment is high, the insurance benefit should reflect what's needed to pay for rent and groceries and essentials. When you have better times, the benefit can taper off. And I decided last spring we had to do this because the unemployment system is in a time warp. It really goes back to the 1930s. So what I'm talking about is a crucial next step for the program. My question to you, Ms. Tanden, what can you do as OMB Director to help us secure this crucial unemployment insurance reform?
Thank you so much, Senator. And I do recognize how critical it is that we have more stability and more security in our, essentially social safety net. And having automatic stabilizers would provide more stability to families. It would provide more security to families. And obviously, there would be more planning we could do. I appreciate that unemployment cliffs have become an action-forcing event, but I consider that an unfortunate aspect of where we are. And I think we've seen in this pandemic particularly that people are suffering because of completely extraneous events like a global pandemic. So if there is a time to move forward with automatic stabilizers, it is in this moment where so many people are subject to so much pain at the whims of a pandemic and how it's raging. And as we know right now, it is raging with significant impact across the country.
I appreciate your answer, and you were, if anything, pretty diplomatic, because this idea of forcing folks laid off through no fault of their own to kind of lurch from one cliff to another. We saw this over Christmas time, and we saw on the TV news parents were giving up their meals in order to help their kids. We've got to have a good government approach along the lines of what I've described, and I appreciate your answer. Let me ask one other question, if I might. Rural communities were hurting even before the pandemic, and now the roller coaster they're on, particularly in the rural West, has just been devastating in terms of their being able to lay the foundation for a brighter future. Senator Crapo, Senator Merkley, Senator Risch, and I have made a proposal for reforming a law that we wrote with the help of the Budget Committee some time ago to reform the Secure Rural Schools program. And in effect, to take it off this rural roller coaster where, for example, the county roads program can't even predict what kind of funds it might have, and establish an endowment program to try to grow the payments for the counties. My question here is, will you work with us on this bipartisan proposal that has received an enormous amount of support from rural counties all across America?
Absolutely, Senator. I really appreciate
Ms.
the
Tanden, if you can make your remarks brief, because we've got a 12 o'clock
Oh.
impeachment engagement we got to get to. So I want to hear from everybody. So please.
Yes, absolutely, Senator. I appreciate the bipartisan leadership on this committee.
Thank you.
Senator Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a very engaging conversation. I think it went over a half an hour and covered a broad array of topics. I think it's worth it for the public record to cite a few things. I've come from Main Street, built a business, a real little one, that over many, many years was able to turn into that American dream. From my point of view, a lot of the policies that were in place had kind of hit the sweet spot pre-COVID. A lot of that had to do with, I think, unleashing the entrepreneurial spirit across the country, looking at the productive side of our economy in a way that's different from how you treat big corporations that generally have had their way here in terms of impacting not only statute, tax code. The rest of us have none of that. And I think it would be wise to look at understanding the difference, I think we talked about, when it comes to personal income tax, which is currently all thrown into one category, where wage and 1099 income is treated the same as business income. One is liquid, one is illiquid. And sooner or later, we're going to have the discussion for those here, which would be most of everyone that love the place for what you can do through it. I've been amazed mostly in the little over 2 years of how many places, businesses, entities, all organizations that are interdependent with the federal government think that it's just going to go on the way it is. And I advise them, maybe look at getting a new business partner until we recognize that we borrow over 20% of what we spend here. Over half of our structural $1 trillion deficits, and I'm sure it's more than that now, driven by Social Security, Medicare, actuarially things we've seen coming for a long time. And I'll never forget in my first budget meeting, Chris Van Hollen said the thing we are lacking most is political will. We were generating record revenues pre-COVID, but we're at record levels of spending. And in all other places that work in this country, from households, which are laughed at when you use that analogy, school board, which I've been on, state government, especially running a business, there's accountability. And we have none of that here. We've got a budget committee where I don't think we've actually done a budget that we've adhered to in over 20 years. So you have got a lot, I think, to work on. I'd also cite that regardless of the tax rate in this country, we basically had revenues in a groove of about 17% of GDP. Spending's been closer to 20. So I don't think you can keep this place healthy unless you look at the spending side of it. Healthcare, I've been the loudest senator on reforming it. It's a broken industry. I agree with the chairman on that. But before we throw more government at it, I'd like to see transparency, competition, engaging the healthcare consumer, things that would fix it to make what we pay for through the government for healthcare and the private sector a better value. Is that something that you would work with me on?
Absolutely, Senator. I want to really just note issues of healthcare costs in the country. Per capita costs are very high in the United States. It's one of the reasons why our healthcare system is so expensive. And I would just note to you that, if the issue of transparency and competition amongst large concentrated interests in the healthcare system is a big challenge. So market concentration within healthcare is a big challenge, as well as the fact that we do not have transparencies around pharmaceutical costs, hospital costs, and work in this area can have huge impact. If you go back to 2010, CBO projected that we would be spending 6.4% of GDP on federal healthcare costs. It actually was 5.4. That's a savings of over $1 trillion over the last decade from some of the reforms around bundling and other issues. So I would just say I would look forward to an opportunity to work with you in those on issues around price transparency, particularly in pharmaceuticals and market concentration.
Thank you.
Okay, I apologize, but I'm going to try to keep people to 5 minutes because we have a number of folks who want to speak, and we have a 12 o'clock impeachment engagement.
And my apologies.
No, not at all. All right, Senator Stabenow was going to talk to us virtually.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you, Senator Sanders, and to Senator Graham. I look forward to working with both of you on this committee, and to Neera Tanden. Ms. Tanden, congratulations on your nomination. And if I might just say as an editorial comment, when we were asked to respond to would be your mean tweets over the years, that we've endured 4 years of the ultimate mean tweets. I know we were all thinking that, and certainly I don't want to hold you to a higher standard, but we certainly want to turn the page on how we move forward together, and wish we had seen those comments consistently over the last 4 years. So, but welcome. And I want to focus, first of all, on something I've spoken with you about, and that is strengthening our Buy American Act and the jobs that can come with that. And I know this is a priority for you. It's a priority for President Biden. I'm very excited about that we ensure that federal government spends taxpayer dollars on American products that are made by American workers. And what we are seeing now is that we need to strengthen those laws and frankly close some of those loopholes. Over the last years, due to loopholes and outright non-compliance, federal agencies have bypassed Buy American Act provisions in order to purchase products made by foreign entities without good explanations for why they're doing that. So 2 years ago, my office issued an oversight report that between 2008, 2016, federal agencies spent over $92 billion on foreign contracts because of loopholes. And the Department of Defense was one of the main drivers of foreign contracts. So we were bolstered by the Inspector General for Department of Defense at the time, which found numerous instances of non-compliance with Buy American Act and Berry Amendment. And this is jobs. This is American jobs. So I'm so glad to see President Biden take aggressive action through an executive order within just his first week on Buy American requirements, and appreciate what that means as well for so many small and medium-sized manufacturers like we have in Michigan. But my question is this. His executive order is a great first step. But do you believe that Congress has a role to play in this area in terms of ensuring federal taxpayer dollars are used for American industries, American jobs? And if so, what additional steps can Congress take to bolster our shared goal of strengthening Buy American laws?
Senator, thank you so much for the question and for your leadership on the issue of Buy America. And I would say that it's always the case that with executive actions, they can be limited from administration to administration. So to set permanent policy. That's really an area for Congress. And so would welcome the leadership of Congress. You're absolutely right that there have been many waivers granted in the last several years by agencies, and part of the executive action is to publish those waivers so that there can be real accountability around issues around Buy America. And it can also provide information to domestic manufacturers about how they can better compete in the future. So I would really welcome an opportunity to work with you to make these policies permanent, and welcome ideas from this committee about the Buy America provisions. Obviously, one of the aspects of the executive order is to have a Make It in America office within OMB and within the Office of Federal Procurement. So I would welcome ideas from you and other members of this committee.
Well, thank you so much. And in fact, I'll be soon introducing legislation with my Budget Committee friend and colleague, Senator Braun, that are going to make much needed reforms in the Buy American Act. So we look forward to working with you. There's accountability, tightening up of some of the waivers, also training, also making sure that basically we are doing everything possible to bring those jobs, that manufacturing, and all the things that we can do to make things and grow things back to America. And I'm excited about what we can do together, and very much am excited about your having the opportunity to serve in this role. Congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Stabenow. Senator Toomey via video. Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Tanden, many people, myself included, have been critical of Donald Trump for casting doubt on the legitimacy of the 2020 election that he lost. Mm-hmm. You yourself have a long list of statements casting doubt on the legitimacy of the 2016 election. In January of 2017, you tweeted, and I quote, "Why does he," meaning Donald Trump, "lie about this? Because he knows people have intuitive sense Russians did enough damage to affect more than 70,000 votes in 3 states," end quote. The 70,000 votes certainly appears to be a reference to Hillary Clinton's losing margin in the 3 states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, which would have resulted in her victory had she won those states. You also tweeted, and I quote, "Why would hackers hack unless they could change results? What's the point?" End quote. So these are just 2 of the statements that you have made that certainly undermine the faith and the integrity of the 2016 election. So let me just ask you directly. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me this morning that you believe that Donald Trump was legitimately elected president in 2016 and his presidency was legitimate?
Absolutely, and I said that in November 13th, 2016. So immediately after the election, I said President Trump was duly elected and that he legitimately won the election immediately after the election itself.
Okay, but after that, you subsequently suggested that the Russians manipulated the results in the 3 states that were decisive. So no, I'm glad to get clarity. We've got very few minutes. Let me just run a couple of things. Following up on Senator Graham's question on school choice, mm-hmm. You made the point that wealthy families have access to private education, which is exactly correct. It's also the case that in many, many school districts, Philadelphia, most across Pennsylvania, the average expenditure per student in the public system is greater than the cost of educating kids in many of the private schools, especially Catholic, but including others in those systems. If we gave parents the money that we force them to utilize through the government-run schools, if we gave the parents that money to choose a school for their child, that school would have to be accountable to the parents, wouldn't it?
Sir, I think one of the challenges with private schools and other areas is broad accountability. But I don't take away from the fact that wealthy parents can be accountable and hold.
Right, but the point is that if we could pass school choice, we would give poor and middle income families the same choice that wealthy families have today. Let me just. I've got very little time. I just want a quick question on unemployment insurance benefits. Mm-hmm. If unemployment insurance pays people more not to work than they can make by going to work, does that have any incentive at all on their inclination to go back to work?
Senator, there have been several studies over the last year of this phenomenon, of this question of whether the unemployment levels of support is discouraging work, and they have found that actually people are more concerned about their personal safety, and that is why we have discouragement of work. That's the analysis. I will always be guided by facts and evidence on these questions.
But you didn't answer the question. The question is, do you think if a person can make more money by not working than they can make by working, does that affect their incentive to go back to work?
I would say that we should really look at why people may not be working, and it may be because of concerns about safety during a global pandemic.
Okay. Last question for you. You have been an advocate for free college for, I guess, middle-income folks. It's the case that college grads, on average, make nearly $1 million more over the course of their lifetime than non-college grads. How is it fair to a blue-collar worker who did not go to college to have to contribute tax dollars to cover the cost of tuition of someone who's going to make $1 million more on average than he or she makes?
I'd say broadly, Senator, that you could extend that argument for high school or other forms of education.
No, everybody's required to go to high school.
From a system in which people have access to good quality education.
That's not true. We require people to go to high school, at least through the age of 16, and virtually everybody does go through high school. So I see my time has expired, but thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you, Senator. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman, and congratulations on assuming the gavel here. Look forward to working with you and Senator Graham. Ms. Tandon, welcome. Good to have you here. I'm going to give you two presents today, and I'm going to describe them both to you. The first one is going to be this graph, which I think you've seen before. As you will recall, in 2010, the Budget Committee, off of CBO information, did an estimate of what federal health care costs were going to be. And that's this top line right here.
Yes.
But we passed the Affordable Care Act back here. And what happened actually is that health care costs came down substantially below that projection. So again, 2020 did another prediction. And based off the actuals, this is that prediction. If you simply move that extrapolation to what was originally predicted, so it's apples against apples here, you will see that in the next decade, 2020 to 2030, the difference between what was originally projected and where we are on healthcare spending saves over $5 trillion. No benefits were cut. Nobody got taken away their right to have some procedure. I think that what happened is that we changed the way we did business in healthcare. We set up the CMMI, the Center for Innovation. We set up the accountable care organizations that many providers have profited from. Proudly, the two best are probably in Rhode Island, super scores, so little home state props there. And we've helped move the healthcare system off the fee-for-service treadmill. And I want to give you this, and I will give you this, because I want you every day you're at your job to be thinking of what more can we do that got us that $5 trillion in savings. I fought constantly with the Obama administration about things that they did that would have actually damaged this process. And in the Trump administration, there's no point even having that conversation. But now I think we've got enough of a record that it's really worth fighting to figure out, because in these ACOs in Rhode Island, you've got happier customers, you've got better care, you've got more support. It's not just the triple aim win, it's like win, 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 win across the board. And they're sending checks back to Medicare for the savings. So let's work on that, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, that is what I was referring to with Senator Braun of the $1.4 trillion.
Yeah, I'm kind of a segue to Senator Braun on that. I got that. So second thing, this volume. This is a bunch of reports warning of economic crash due to unconstrained climate change. Some are from like Freddie Mac, which has warned that coastal property is vulnerable to a crash worse than the 2008 mortgage meltdown that would cascade through the whole economy because of the additional threat of sea level rise and storms and what that does to insurance and what that does to a 30-year mortgage and all of that. But it's other groups as well. It's Moody's, it's the Bank of International Settlements, it's Standard & Poor's, it's McKinsey, it's BlackRock. There's a report by a Nobel Prize-winning economist that he filed under oath and subject to cross-examination in all of that. In February of 2019, I sent this to every single one of my colleagues here in the Senate with very little effect, apparently. But I want you to be aware of it, and I'd like you to comment briefly on how seriously you at OMB are going to take these warnings. If there is a crash from the carbon bubble bursting, if there is a crash from coastal property values collapsing, it will have been the most warned of crash in history. And what are we going to do about it? And do you take these warnings seriously?
Senator, I absolutely take them seriously, and the president himself recognizes the deep, cataclysmic crisis of climate change. But I'd also say I'm really excited by the possibility, if I am privileged enough to be confirmed, I am excited by the possibility of taking into account the costs of inaction on climate and the impacts of what the federal government is doing by its actions and inaction on climate and the economic impact of those decisions over time. As you so clearly stated, markets, insurers, people who are assessing
not
risk.
Greenies,
not
hard-eyed, flinty economic people.
Wall
are
Street,
warning.
banks, etc., are all taking into these challenges. Sorry,
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did come back. One of the reasons I wanted to express to you the fact that I really do appreciate the fact that you want to use this committee, have open, honest debates. I don't think we use numbers enough around here. I realize I'm an accountant, but we really do need to look at facts and figures. I think one of the things I want to throw out on the table here, this is from an article that Phil Graham wrote for the Wall Street Journal. I think we realize he's pretty good with numbers and has his facts straight. But in 2020, last year, the average household in the bottom 20% of earnings got $45,000 in transfer payments. Now, I would imagine those things are tax-free. Now, I think we all agree. I think you start with, what do we agree on? We all realize people are hurting and people need financial help. And there's been a lot of financial help. I mean, $4 trillion worth. My concern, I think this is shared by not only Phil Graham, but Jason Furman and Lawrence Summers, is the potential of overheating our economy with another $2 trillion when the per capita disposable income is up 5.5%. Savings, $1.6 trillion higher last year than 2019. Private business up 25%. Federal Reserve is estimating a 4.2% growth rate for this year. IMF just increased their estimate to 5.1%. So, listen, I realize we had a natural disaster, COVID, in 2020, but there is so much pent-up demand, so much excess savings. It's just going to be coming, bursting forth in economic activity, and we do need to be concerned about overheating our economy. In addition to that article and some other articles written by, as I mentioned, Jason Furman and Lawrence Summers, IRS just came out with their 2018 tax data, and I've got the Tax Foundation's summary of that, Ms. Tanden. They've got some interesting notations on what the IRS presented. First one was in 2018, the first year after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the decrease in taxes paid was $65 billion. Now, the static score on the tax plan was $1.5 trillion. If you just multiply that times 10, that'd be a reduction in revenue of about $650 billion. So I would argue that those of us that supported that, because we were looking for economic growth to make up for that static revenue loss, the dynamic scoring, I think this indicates that we were maybe on the right path here, because if it was really going to be $1.5 trillion, you think that revenue loss would have been $150 billion rather than $65 billion. Would you kind of agree with that assessment?
Senator, I would actually have to look at that data. One of the concerns about the tax cut was that it disproportionately impacted higher income people and was used with deficit spending to address it at a time where we weren't facing economic crises. So I would have to look at that data. There are other data, like business investment did not increase after the law. Some of the promises around wages didn't follow through, but I obviously would welcome looking at that analysis.
Yeah, one thing I think I agree with Senator Sanders on is I am concerned about growing wealth disparity in this country. But I think we also have to look at it honestly. Other work that Senator Graham has done is oftentimes when we look at that, we look at income, pre-tax income, and we look at income before benefits. And when you add benefits like $45,000 and you take away taxes, that disparity is a lot closer than what it looks before taxes and before benefits. So we need to look at that honestly. There was and I realize this is an old survey, but it was done in 2012 for the Hill, and really asking the right question when it comes to what the public's opinion is of tax rates. I know Senator Graham was talking to you earlier about that. Oftentimes, say, hey, do you think the rich ought to pay more? And people go, yeah, as long as somebody else is paying more, I'm all for it. But then you ask a fairer question, what should be the top tax rate on any dollar of income for people making over $250,000? And here's the results. 61% thought it ought to be 25% or less. 75% thought it ought to be 30% or less. Only 4% thought it should be, actually 6%, should be 40% or higher. I think Americans are pretty fair. They realize we all need to pay a fair tax rate, but at the same time, we need to provide incentives for economic activity so people can invest in businesses and create jobs. So do you kind of agree with that assessment that kind of a 30% top tax rate seems to be pretty fair to the American public?
Well, I wouldn't, I'll take the data that you're offering. I would also note, though, that in the tax code has many ways in which upper income people can avoid taxation, stepped up basis. Capital gains is taxed at a very different rate. So I would just note that what people are actually paying and what their income rate paying is not the same, and so what they're actually paying may be.
And I'm all for tax simplification and tax rationalization. That makes sense. My final point is the top 1% made 20% of the income. They paid 40% of the taxes. 1.9% ratio. Thanks.
Senator Warner will join us on video.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me first of all say that it's great to see you, Neera. And let me say to my colleagues, I've worked with Ms. Tanden for years. We have not always agreed, but she is incredibly smart. She engages. I say to my Republican colleagues, you won't find a smarter, better partner than Neera Tanden, and someone that I hope you will, through this confirmation process, give her the benefit of the doubt. She will be, I think, a great OMB director, and look forward to voting for her and confirming her. I'm going to normally with Neera in these settings, I would launch into my whole future work and how do we fix capitalism issues. I'm not. I'm going to do a little home cooking on a couple of issues, Neera, on my questions. So here's Adam. I got 2 or 3 I'd love to get to. One, one of the things that's really important to Commonwealth of Virginia is the Army Corps of Engineers work, particularly around our new starts in terms of harbor improvements. Over the last few years, we've seen the Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works program, which has been extraordinarily bipartisan, where there is a thorough review, where projects come forward, get evaluated, and then on a basis of points, usually get added into that precious new start category. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, we have seen that process politicized. We've seen a project, for example, in my state, Norfolk Harbor, which has far and away over the last 2 years, and particularly in the last year, clearly been qualified as the top project to get funded. under any kind of objective analysis, that at the 11th and a half hour, that objective analysis was thrown out of the door by the previous administration's OMB, and a political process took over. So I hope that you will be willing to conduct a full review of the Army Corps work plans to make sure that we can get back to a fair evaluation. We sometimes know the Army Corps of Engineers operates on its own, kind of as a separate branch of government. But in this case, the review process has been thoroughly vetted. Both parties generally agree with it, and we should not have at the 11th hour projects that suddenly appear magically on the list trump over all of the projects that have been waiting patiently, making their cases. So I hope you'll be willing to commit to that kind of review of the process and get it back to a fully nonpartisan, objective review.
Absolutely, and I would say that if I'm privileged to be confirmed, I will commit to every member of this committee. The work we do at OMB will be nonpartisan, guided by facts and evidence. And I will look forward to working with you on this particular question.
Thank you so much. Another area that's bipartisan, I know from the previous Treasury Secretary, it was one of the areas that he regretted that we didn't, more fully address in the final package, and that is the whole effort of upgrading the technology capacity of the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
The Technology Modernization Fund, which President Biden has at least proposed, I believe $9 billion put in to make sure that we can upgrade our technology. Part of that ought to be at least $1 billion to the IRS. Some of us on this committee have different views about who ought to qualify for the stimulus checks going out. I strongly believe checks ought to go out. I think they ought to be targeted in a fair way. But part of the challenge is I have a lot of folks in my state, and I'm sure every senator can recount these stories, where there are still people, because they've not gotten their 2019 tax returns done in a timely way, that did not receive the benefit from the last set of stimulus checks because they haven't got everything validated. My fear is that there are already efforts to try to, by some up here, to take away that necessary, long-term, I would call almost a capital investment in upgrading our federal government technology, with a particular emphasis on IRS technology. This will clearly come under your purview as OMB, and we're going to need a fighter to make sure that we all complain about some of the inefficiencies in the federal government. When our technology is 20 years old, we shouldn't be surprised at how poor some of our services are. Can you address that?
I think not, because we have to just get through a lot of senators to make the 12 o'clock impeachment.
Okay. Well, if you take it for the record. Thank you, Bernie.
Thank you, Mark. Senator Scott.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Sanders. Thank you for hosting this hearing. Ms. Tanden, you in the op-ed you published last year, you said now is not the time for policyholders to worry about rising deficits and debt as they consider what steps to take in regards to the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
So we're sitting now on we talked about this the other day, we're sitting on $27 trillion worth of debt, and the deficit going forward looks like it's going to continue, and we're starting to see long-term interest rates go up. They're still low, but they're going up. So what's your perception of how much debt we can have, and do you have concerns about the amount of debt we have and the fact that long-term interest rates are starting to move up?
Senator, I would say I very much appreciate the bipartisan action in the Congress, amongst this committee in the Congress, to address the COVID crisis. I also addressed the COVID crisis without contracting the economy by having pay-fors. I mean, it's been deficit financed, and that has been bipartisan, and the crisis continues. We should absolutely monitor interest rates. It is the case that interest rates have remained low in 2017, have remained low in 2018. And in fact, when we had relatively low unemployment, interest rates remained low. We obviously have to monitor that very carefully. We should also recognize, though, that the Fed has tools for high interest rates. It does not have tools for expansionary economic policies anymore. It's essentially can't lower rates anymore. It could increase rates. I do think it is incumbent upon all of us as policymakers to monitor these issues very, very closely. But I would also say that our unemployment numbers from Friday demonstrated that we still have a lot of economic pain. And in this moment, we do have to ensure strong economic recovery, which over the long run would make us stronger. It would put us in a better position to address deficit issues. But as a matter, we should all be concerned about long-term fiscal sustainability.
So do you have a number that we shouldn't go above? I mean, is 30 trillion too much, or 35 trillion? I mean, if you look since George W. Bush was elected president, the unbelievable increase in debt, if we continue on that path, I mean, when we're not just talking about 30 trillion or 35 trillion, we're talking about, unbelievable amounts of debt here. And if we see the 50-year average for long-term rates is over 6%, I mean, that would be $1 trillion increase in interest costs for the federal government a year.
Absolutely. I mean, I did serve towards the end of the Clinton administration when we had a surplus. At that time, our revenues were 20% of GDP and our spending was 20% of GDP, and that is basically how we managed our surplus. So I recognize that that we have to be concerned about long-term health. The case is that over the next 10 years, we do see increasing deficits towards the end from issues like the aging of the population, and we do need to manage those. I think the data that I'm most focused on in terms of debt is the cost of borrowing itself. Now, the cost of borrowing has declined because interest rates are so low. You're absolutely right, though, that we face high interest rates. That cost goes up. So that is an area where I think we should monitor closely. But in this particular moment, the concerns, I think, are significant about scarring in the economy and basically growing at a low level for too long. If you look at CBO's analysis, I mean, they say we would not, without further action, we wouldn't get back to pre-pandemic levels with our GDP for several years.
Thank you. In 2012, you said if we're going to have a deal to address long-term deficit reduction, we need to put both entitlements on the table as well as taxes. So can you address what you anticipate with regard to that? The Medicare Trust Fund, the Social Security Trust Fund are going insolvent over the next few years. And so what would you do?
So I would say just about my 2012 comment, that was at a time where people were not putting revenue on the tables. And so I was making the case that we should have revenue as part of the table, as part of the discourse. The president has proposed, as I said earlier, lifting the payroll cap to address Social Security solvency for families over $400,000. I think there are a range of ideas here. I do think we should recognize how important the benefit structure of these programs have been as a lifeline for needy families, particularly in this crisis. So as we think through how we address them in the long term, I welcome a bipartisan conversation about that. The president has his own proposals. I do think on the Medicare Trust Fund issue, Medicare Trust Fund was expanded, solvency was expanded dramatically by many ACA reforms, and there's many areas we can build out in that area as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Merkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and greetings, Neera. Great to have you here. I'll try to get through a whole bunch of questions very quickly. Will you make sure that in the budget we fund the interagency task force on the reunification of families?
Absolutely, Senator.
And will you take a close look at rules the Trump administration put forward that were trying to undermine the Flores settlement agreement, which required the humanitarian treatment of children?
Yes, we will absolutely look at those rules.
Thank you. In the past, OMB, particularly the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, has really delayed rules. It's been kind of a place where rules go in and nothing happens. An example would be the vaping rule. And as a result of inaction for years, we had an epidemic of addiction to new forms, great for the tobacco industry, terrible for American health. We make sure that we don't have OMB become kind of the obscure pit that things fall into and we can never get them out again.
Yes, and I think that is one of the reasons for the president's executive memorandum, which is to really have OIRA focus on general welfare, public good.
Great. And also, I had experiences in the past where we appropriated funds for particular things. One was to rebuild villages that had been wiped out by dams on the Columbia River. We had worked with the Corps of Engineers to get the right language and so forth. Mr. Mulvaney then said, basically, I don't care about rectifying these historic wrongs. These wrongs. I'm going to just block the money from ever going out the door. Will you be fair to Democrats and Republicans alike on issues that have been passed by legislation?
Absolutely, Senator, and it is my focus to not be concerned about the party affiliations of people asking questions and the need to properly appropriate and apportion funding.
Thank you. And OIRA has not always used a cost-benefit analysis that incorporated the cost of carbon and damaged the externality, if you will, the negative externalities. Is that something you can help address?
Absolutely, and I would say that we are committed to, as I said earlier, to internalize the cost of carbon, cost of inaction, and the cost of action as well.
Great, and the President has indicated support for 40% of green federal investments to go to environmental justice communities, those who have been left behind before, those who are suffering transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And how will you envision OMB's role in tracking that and targeting that, trying to make sure we help communities that have been previously left behind, from fossil fuel communities to urban inner city communities?
Thank you so much, Senator. OMB will play a critical role in ensuring that we keep our commitment in how we're allocating those dollars and how agencies themselves are allocating dollars to make sure that they go to communities that have been left behind, tribal, as you mentioned, communities of color.
And when it comes to how OMB interacts with the power of the federal government to address student debt, can you, I know you've mentioned this before I got into the room, but I'd like to just hear again how you envision OMB can help drive solutions to the problem of massive student debt, something many other developed nations are saying, hey, it's so important to the individual's life and to our economy. We want to make sure people have a track to be able to acquire an upper education for jobs that require it. Do you see that as important, and do you see debt as a problem, and how can OMB help?
Great. I do see that as a central problem. I will say I went to UCLA. It's a public university in a state where they recognize how it's a public good, but it's also a good for the country. So the president has proposed an agenda that tries to redress student debt and the massive levels of debt that young people are taking on, and that is not just a challenge for those people, but it obviously hurts economic growth. It hurts their ability to purchase a home. It hurts their ability to be economically mobile. So I know there's a rich, robust discourse about executive action versus legislative steps. The president has supported legislative steps to address student debt and reduce student debt, and particularly in this crisis, eliminate student debt where we can.
Thank you very much. I so appreciate that you're willing to bring your vast set of experiences in different positions and a broad range of issues to bear on a critical agency to help our nation build back better. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. Senator Kennedy.
Ms. Tanden, congratulations. I think we're both aware how powerful the OMB position is. That you will touch on just about every social and economic policy. You're probably also aware that we produce, we meaning the United States, produce about 200,000, or rather 2,000 metric tons of nuclear waste every year. And we've got it stored all over hell and half of Georgia. I think about 80 different locations. It's dangerous. I'd like your personal thoughts, not the president's thoughts, but your personal thoughts about what we ought to do about that.
I've studied various issues like Yucca Mountain and other issues around nuclear waste. And I think the challenge around nuclear power, personally, my perspective is that nuclear power is cleaner. When we are thinking about greenhouse gas emissions,
yes,
that's an
ma'am.
option.
Excuse me for interrupting. I hate to do this, but what do you think we ought, if anything, we ought to do about the nuclear waste being dispersed around the United States?
I think it is. I think we should be taking active steps to ensure the security of
Anything
nuclear
else?
waste.
We want it to be secure. We can agree on that. Anything else?
Sir, I'm happy to work with you in your office on concerns you have about nuclear waste disposal.
Let me ask you this. Is it not true that you have told a major news organization of this country that you support moving that waste to Yucca Mountain?
I don't believe I have, actually.
Okay.
But I'm happy to examine some statement I've made in the past.
Well, you're under oath. Are you saying you didn't say it or you don't remember it?
I have to tell you, I don't remember making any comments about Yucca Mountain, but in my long career, I may have. So I'm happy to I don't know. I'm not remembering as this moment.
All right. Let me ask you about Senator Sanders' line of question. You were a very aggressive fundraiser for your think tank. Mm-hmm. And that's, I'm not suggesting you did anything wrong. Please don't construe my remarks as suggesting that. But there will be a perception. I'm not saying it's reality, but as we know in government and politics, perception matters. But there will be a perception that if you took Wall Street, given the money you raised from them, that if you took Wall Street, turned them upside down and shook them, you'd fall out of their pockets. Will that, how are you going to deal with that? I mean, when Wall Street comes calling and you're at OMB.
Senator, at the Center for American Progress, we proposed a financial transaction tax. We proposed higher regulations of Wall Street. We proposed dealing with carried interest many, many, many years ago. We proposed a whole series of policy proposals that would restrict the power of Wall Street. I believe Wall Street has too much power in our political discourse, and I have said that multiple times. I have said that in every role.
Okay, let me interrupt you because I got to go to another subject. I appreciate your answer. I have to tell you, I'm very disturbed about your personal comments about people. And it's not just one or two. I think you deleted about 1,000 tweets. And it wasn't just about Republicans. And I don't mind disagreements in policy. I think that's great. I love the dialectic. But the comments were personal. I mean, you call Senator Sanders everything but an ignorant slut.
That is not true.
And when you said these things, did you mean them?
I wouldn't have said ignorant.
Senator, I have to say, I deeply regret my comments.
I understand that, but when you said them, did you mean them? I understand you've taken them back, but did you mean them?
I'd say the discourse over the last 4 years on all sides has been incredibly polarizing.
I'm asking about yours. Did you mean them?
I really feel badly about them, Senator.
Did you mean them?
I feel badly about them.
Did you mean them when you said them?
I mean, I would say social media is I've
Did you mean them when you said them?
I feel terribly about them.
Did you mean them when you said them, or were you not telling the truth?
I mean, I feel badly. I look back at them. I said them. I feel badly about them. I deleted tweets over.
Are you saying that because you want to be confirmed?
No, I felt badly about them. And
did you mean them when you said them?
Senator, I must have meant them, but I really regret them.
I want the record to reflect that I did not call Senator Sanders an ignorant slut. Okay?
Thank you. I don't know how I should take that, Senator Kennedy, but Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excited about your leadership. And to Ms. Tanden, congratulations. I have 6 questions that are susceptible probably to yes/no answers, really short. If senators of either party reach out to you or your office with requests for information, do you plan to respond to the extent possible in a timely manner?
Yes.
If the Government Accountability Office reaches out to you or your office seeking cooperation relating to congressional oversight of the executive branch, will you direct your staff to work with them in a timely and complete manner?
Absolutely, yes.
Will you respect the requirements and intent of the Impoundment Control Act and other laws that govern how the executive branch spends congressionally appropriated funds?
Absolutely.
Would you ever facilitate the withholding of congressionally appropriated funds for political purposes?
Absolutely not.
Do you plan to respect the expertise of the career staff at the OMB and follow the facts on OMB analysis?
Absolutely, and I believe they are a great asset to the federal government and OMB.
Finally, should you be the OMB director at the end of the administration, would you fully cooperate with the transition to the subsequent administration's team regardless of the president-elect's political affiliation?
Absolutely, Senator. 100%.
I ask those questions because we've had some challenges in each of these areas, and I'm glad to hear your answers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Kane. Senator Van Hollen, I think, is with us on video.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to you, Chairman Sanders, and to Ranking Member Graham. I think the Budget Committee can be a central place for debating and discussing and acting on the big issues of our day. To Ms. Tanden, congratulations on your nomination. In selecting you, President Biden has picked somebody who has both deep and wide policy expertise and a life story that shows how the government can help families when they're most in need and provide a springboard to success. So I look forward to working with you on these issues. I've heard earlier in this debate a reference to the rise in per capita income over the last year. And I think it's important that we recognize that often references to per capita income can be very misleading. So, for example, if Jeff Bezos had moved to Baltimore City in 2020, the per capita income of the residents of Baltimore City would have tripled from $53,000 a year to $175,000 a year, even though nobody was any better off as a result. So I hope as we debate these issues going forward, we'll remember that. And my question relates to this tale of two economies and the K-shaped recovery. This is one of the reasons why it's necessary that we take bold action with the American Rescue Plan. CBO has told us that if we do not act, we will continue to see high levels of unemployment until the year 2025. So can you just talk briefly about the risks of undershooting here when it comes to emergency action? And in that connection, talk about the problem of long-term unemployment. This is something many of us are very focused on. We have 4 million Americans long-term unemployed, and I'm worried as the economy does recover, that we don't leave millions of people behind, because all the data shows that the longer you're out of a job, the harder it is to find one. And when you find one, you're often at a lower wage that you have to live with for the remainder of your working life. So if you could talk about those challenges and your willingness to work with us to address them.
Absolutely, Senator. I'll just briefly say, I think for all the statements about overheating the economy, we should recognize where the economy is right at this moment, which is we have data that any economic recovery is faltering with the COVID crisis. Unemployment numbers last Friday demonstrated that we have continuing to have 10 million people. Some data suggests it's 12 million people who are unemployed today who wouldn't have been unemployed a year ago. And so that is a deep crisis that we need to address. And you're absolutely right about the K-shaped recovery. Lower income workers are bearing the huge brunt of this crisis, and that is why action is required and necessary.
And can you talk about, as we go forward, the importance of looking at
Chris, I'm sorry, I got to cut.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I understand.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on the chairmanship. Look forward to working with you on this committee. I will try to be brief. I had an opportunity to ask Ms. Tanden a few questions yesterday as a member of his GAT, and appreciate the opportunity to raise a few more issues and questions here today. And if only there was somebody else who can ask if they meant what they tweeted later this afternoon, whether or not they've been taken back. But let me jump into it here. In regards to the economic recovery that we keep talking about, and COVID, which is clearly the most front burner issue of all. The state I represent, California, as you know, constitutes the 5th largest economy in the world and the largest economy of any state in the nation. The saying is that as goes California, so goes the nation. So we will not achieve a successful national economic recovery unless there's recovery in California. At the same time, California, and particularly Los Angeles County, has been the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic. And most people will agree, including most economists, that our economy will not recover until we get through the pandemic. I'll call your attention to a recent New York Times article about the equity in which vaccine distribution or lack of equity vaccine distribution has been made and the consequences of that. So my question is this, Ms. Tanden, will you commit to leveraging the full resources of the Office of Management and Budget to help California get this virus under control, particularly when it comes to vaccine distribution?
Absolutely, Senator, and I would just very quickly say that I think it's really important that the administration is taking the steps to ensure that federally qualified health centers can provide vaccines in places that are hard to reach, provide vaccines in places that communities of color are disproportionately impacted by, and that's really important. And community health centers are playing a vital role. I appreciate Chairman Sanders' leadership over many years on the issue of community health centers.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I'd love to submit this article for the record as well. Just one other question in the interest of time. Ms. Tanden, we often talk about immigration in moral terms, and we should. And I appreciate you sharing in your opening statement your life story and your family's journey. The 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country are part of the backbone of many communities and our economy as well. They are essential workers in many cases on the front lines of the pandemic, from farm workers to the restaurant industry to the healthcare industry and many other sectors in between. In my opinion, they deserve not just safety in the workplace, but dignity and a pathway to citizenship. But immigration is not just a moral imperative, it is also an economic imperative. I believe you're familiar with a 2016 study from the Center for American Progress, where you note that undocumented workers contributed $4.7 trillion to the United States GDP. And it's been estimated that undocumented immigrants specifically contribute $11.7 billion in state and local taxes and $12 billion in Social Security revenues annually. As our country works to recover from the pandemic-induced recession, at the same time that the baby boom generation is retiring in droves, it's clear that our nation needs the economic contributions of immigrant workers now more than ever. So, Ms. Tanden, as the Senate takes up immigration reform legislation in the coming months, will you work with us and bring the full resources of the office to bear in helping illustrate the significance of immigrants and their economic contributions to our nation?
Absolutely, Senator, and I would note that there's been much work done in recent years about how comprehensive immigration reform will ensure broader economic growth. I am proud of the work I've done on a bipartisan basis with the offices of Senator Graham and many other Republicans in the past on the issue of recognizing how comprehensive immigration reform can build and it is not just a moral issue, but an economic case. And as the wages rise for people who have citizenship, that helps America's economy grow and grow more robustly.
Thank you, Ms. Tanden. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator. I want to thank Ms. Tanden for appearing before the committee today. Ms. Tanden, your full statement will be included in the record. As information for all senators, questions for the record are due by 5 p.m. today, with signed hard copies delivered in the committee clerk to the committee clerk in Dirksen 624. Email copies will also be accepted due to our current conditions. Under our rules, Ms. Tanden will have 7 days from receipt of our questions to respond with answers. With no further business before the committee, this hearing is adjourned. Thanks, Ms. Tanden.
Thank you so much.